All right, here's a video I shot in Calgary in an arena mixing red hot chili peppers, November of 2012. Fully analog setup, no board lights, no board labeling, just the whole vibe of how I was mixing. Console off to the side. It's an older video. I cleaned up the audio a bit and added subtitles. And then at the end, I go over all the gear that I'm using and why I selected all that outboard gear and such and the assets of it. You might find it interesting. I've done it before, but this one is cleaned up and kind of fun. It brought back some great memories. Awesome.
Quick rundown of what I'm doing out here, mixing red hot chili peppers. Got Maggie going on right now. It's all about featuring the cowbell. Percussion channels here, keyboards, cowbell's coming up, over here. Kick drum, Beta 91, audience D6, hand hard left and right. See the top, right, bottom to the left. Little top, track 1, 4-1, 4-2, ride cymbal, overhead, ride, overhead, stereo channel, second snare, bass clean, bass dirty, bass mic, hand hard left and hard right, get the DI to one side, the mic to the other, piano mic, not used, guitar 1 is not used, guitar channel 2, hard right, hard left, channel 3, not used, channel 4, hard right, lead, VCA, vocal, guitar, bass, kick, snare, toms, mountings made out of metal, percussion and keyboards. Here we've got PCM60 sound, H3500 sound, vocal stereo group, guitar stereo group, bass stereo group, kick snare stereo group, tom stereo group, mountings made out of metal, percussion stereo group, keyboard, recording group, left and right, audience mic, subwoofer set left, subwoofer set right, goes to the main rack, RTA, mics in right here, housing key left, housing key right, modifier left, subwoofer right, subwoofer left crossover, subwoofer right crossover, put the spare stuff down there, main PA left, main PA right, DFL left, DFL right meter, PCM60 does all my drums, vocal reverb, H3500 does all the rest of the effects. Anthony, Josh, mic 1, Josh, mic 2, keyboard compressor, no, it's not, I don't know what that does. Vocal stereo compressors, guitar, bass, kick snare, toms, round things made out of metal, keyboard compressor, stereo percussion compressors, snare, kick, snare, rack, floor, and second snare, and that covers everything. Rock show going on up front.
All right, let's take a look at the gear in the rack and why I chose these specific pieces of gear. This is a DBX RTA1 made by Sound Technology, and this RTA is unique in that it had a 60 dB window. You could see a full 60 dB of signal, and if you look at the screen, it's that 4x3. When it's operating, the signals are very tall in relation to the width of the screen. A lot of analyzers have a very wide format, and they're not very tall, so it makes everything look pretty good. It gives you this overly optimistic view. This is very narrow horizontally and tall vertically, and it really makes things look bad. But we don't want it to look pretty. We want to see what's going on. And having this narrow but very tall analyzer gave me a much better view. It allowed me to store and display curves as well as average various curves. If you notice in the video, I hit the analyzer a few times and it starts moving. And what I was doing is averaging the entire song or multiple songs. I would have it this forever averaging. And it would show me the energy exposure that I'm subjecting the audience to, and the frequency response of that versus the instantaneous moment of what's going on, and that long-term energy exposure. For the moment, you might have the snare drum pop up real high and the kick drum pop. You have all these things dancing around. But what's happening over time is really kind of the way a show sounds, not these instantaneous peaks. So this allowed me to do all of that. It was big and clunky, used up a lot of valuable rack space, but they are truly amazing. And I recommend with your analyzers trying to look at them more in a tall and narrow width format in a high resolution so you can really see what's going on. You may also notice there's a little piece of tape on the analyzer in the middle there, and that tape is to cover up one of the bad filters that was maxed out. It was a bit annoying, and I was able to repair the analyzer by covering up the issue. The next thing in the rack is a BSS FCS960 stereo 1/3 octave EQ, and the next thing in the rack is the BSS 960, and these I liked compared to the Clark 360s that had a plus or minus 12 dB in the fader throw. These had a 10 dB, so they were more delicate. You had more fine tuning. Plus, these have a taller fader throw. The faders traveled longer than the Clark, and the Clark was the popular one at the time. But having the longer fader throw along with the reduced amount of boost and cut, these also had ability to reduce the amount of cut. Oh, they had a variable high pass filter as well, which allowed me to roll off the low end in the flown system and kind of change where I'm transitioning into the subs. And that's these two knobs here, and you could turn those on or off. And so it was a real convenient EQ, and it gave me the power that I needed. You can see here that there's a lot of cut happening in this 100 hertz region, and that is room resonance. I'm very in tune with room resonance, and room resonance is you put a frequency into the room and it booms around. Well, you're faced with an option here of either EQing to flat and accepting that a high percentage of the sound in the room resonance region is going to be flawed and muddy or lacking the true sound that you're looking for, just room crap bouncing around, or cutting it out, having a hole in the frequency response, but not having the bad sound in your mix. And I tended to opt to get rid of room resonance rather than focus on frequency response and have that unclear sound in there. Also, if you look closely at the EQ, you'll see that a few knobs are missing at the frequencies of 250 hertz and 2500 hertz. And that is because I would EQ the PA without looking at it. I would do it by feel and reach down, listen to the sound system, and make adjustments. And since I know that every third knob is a doubling of frequency, if I mark 250, if I go 1, 2, 3 down, it's 125. If I go 1, 2, 3 up, it's 500. And the same thing with the 2500 or 2.5K one. And so I'm able to easily get around the EQ without looking at it physically. This is one of the problems I have with digital consoles, is I want to stay focused on what I hear and looking at the artist and never lose or break concentration in order to adjust equipment. And this whole rack and console, if you notice, the console is all dark. There's no lights on it. There's no labels on it. It's all about listening and watching the show and mixing by feel and never losing that focus. The next part in the mix is this Meyer CP10, and this is a house modifier EQ, which isn't really the best name for it. What I would do is I EQ'd the sound system using the CP10, and I would leave that pretty much the same for the whole tour with very slight changes. And that was kind of the EQ to adjust the sound system to the speakers or the array. That got the sound system sounding correct. The 960 EQ, the third octave above it, was my active EQ that I would change from room to room. So that would change with room resonance. You would see that, or various frequencies that stood out due to reflections and reverberation. And that way, I knew kind of where my flat was. This third octave, if it went to flat every day, which I tried to do, gave me a starting point, and the CP10 was kind of my modification of the system processors built into the speakers. Clark Technic DN410. This is a stereo 5-band fully parametric EQ where all 5 bands are adjustable from 20 to 20K. The Meyer CP10 is a stereo 5-band parametric, but they're bandwidth limited. There's a low, low mid, high mid, and high band, and you can't adjust, let's say, 100 hertz with the high band. This Clark, all the bands did everything, and this is particularly useful for subwoofers. I could use multiple bands in very narrow notches to tune the subwoofers, and I had up to 5 bands. So it really allowed me to get rid of some of those cabinet resonances or any other issues. And since I ran subs stereo, left send and right send, the EQ allowed me to adjust left and right. The Duro Meter. These are actually 2 independent monometers that they the Duro Meter. These are actually 2 independent monometers that are mounted in a single rack. That's how they offer them, but they're basically mono chunks, and you can get one in a rack, or they're separatable. And they've actually got separate power cords and everything on the back. This is amazing. The left-right, this helps me keep the left-right balance. I do a lot of decorrelation and making sure that the sound is balanced to left to right. And as well as these have an averaging and peak meter simultaneously. So there's a solid bar for the averaging with a single LED that bounces at the top for peak. And there's an LED at 1 dB increment. So they're extremely accurate, and they've got a very wide bandwidth. These are across my main left and right. And the Duro 1200 meter is kind of a test set. It's got 2 of the exact same thing as the meter above it, but they're in a smaller format. And again, there's 1 dB increments with an averaging and peak simultaneously. But this knob here allows me to adjust the sensitivity of the meter and dial it in. It's on my This knob here allows me to adjust the sensitivity since it's on my PFL bus, as well as this has a sum and difference meter. So if I PFL left and right, or PFL, let's say, a stereo guitar channel, and put it in sum and difference, one meter will tell me what left plus right is, and the other will tell me left minus right. This is really important for knowing phase correlation and polarity. It'll instantly tell you whether something's in polarity or not. If your summing meter is very low and your difference meter is high, you've got a polarity issue, and allows you to look at just left or right and mono. Next in the rack is my favorite reverb, a Lexicon PCM60. And this has a bunch of buttons on the front. I like it because I don't have to look at the rack. I can feel by braille what's going on. Room or plate, large or small, long, medium, short, very short reverb time. So I can reach over to it and just hit some buttons during a song and not even look down at it, still be watching the band, very quickly come up with this reverb sound for that particular song. And I used it for drums as well as vocals. That was just all the reverb I used. I only used 2 effects for arena and stadium shows. I don't need a lot of effects, and that it's just a real nice crunchy reverb. I did another video where I show how clipping the input adds some more crunch to the reverb and gives you even a more audible sound, so you can run it at lower levels and not impact other stuff. Eventide H3500. This thing is great, and having the keypad on the front and the enter knob and the spinning weighted dial there I could again reach over and by braille punch in effect, I could reach over and punch in an effect, hit enter, and not even look at the unit, and very quickly access what I'm looking for. And I would program all the effects that I want in a block so that they were easy to dial up. The spinning knob is nice because you can hit a parameter and spin it and really rise up in the parameter, not holding an arrow down and waiting or whatever. Or you can punch in the numbers. So it's a really fast, easy way to tactile access whatever you need very quickly. It runs a bit hot, and we've had some issues with them going bad. So there's a redundant one ready to go right below it that is the spare unit. All right, the Empirical Labs Distressors. I'm using this on Flea and Anthony, and these are on the vocal channels. Most of my compression is on subgroups, but Flea's a screamer, and he will just sometimes jump out. Anthony, I use a little compression on him just to smooth things out, not too much on the channel side, and this gives me a lot of control very easily. On this tour, Josh had two different mics. He had a mic up front, stage left, and then another one over by Chad, so he could sing his song, sing his parts, and be looking at Chad or hang out with Chad by the drum set. And so I wanted a stereo compressor, not used in stereo, actually a dual mono compressor that allowed me to control his vocals. And I wanted this in the upper rack. And since I was out of rack space, I used a stereo instead of the two distressors. I normally would have used a third distressor for that, but this Fatso was close enough, and it gave a warm sound to it. I didn't really need the Fatso, but it came in handy. I was really looking for seeing everything in a certain place. I want to look at this rack and know exactly what the system is doing and what my key components are doing, how my frequency response is, what my graphs are, left, right, PFL. It gives me the overview of how the show is doing very quickly. Subwoofer dispersion controller. This is a SoundWeb controller, and for this tour and several other ones, I had a custom program built by my friend Nick that allowed me to have the stereo subwoofer send left and right, and it would derive a center third send, which would run the subs in the middle. And I had a couple controls. One was width and one was splay. And width, if I put it on maximum width, then all the things that were sent to subwoofer send 1 would go to the left side, and all the things that are sent to subwoofer send 2 would go to the right side subs, and the middle subs would have a combination of the two. If I set the width to 0 or center, then everything comes out everywhere in mono. So it gives me this mono to stereo control of the two sends. Splay actually delays the things sent to 1 on the right side and the things sent to sub 2 on the left side increasingly. So it actually takes power alley, and for things sent on subwoofer send 1, it moves power alley to stage left, and for things sent on subwoofer send 2, it moves power alley to stage right. And I'm able to put the two power alleys on top of the null zones, and it gave me the ability to smooth out the coverage. It works very well. I'm surprised somebody hasn't come up with a plug-in or some way of doing this. Maybe they have, but it was a very effective way of really controlling subwoofer output and coverage very easily without having a negative impact on sound. All right, let's take a look at the lower rack. And the first thing in there is the FDS310. This is a stereo crossover I used on subwoofer send 1 and 2 that allowed me to chop off the top end of the subwoofers manually in real time. And since I had a high-pass filter on the 960 EQ on the main PA, I could change the crossover point between the mains and the subs very easily, even during the show. Run the mains down lower and get more hit out of the system, and get more energy out of the subs by sending them a narrower bandwidth, maybe running them 60 and below and really hitting them hard, or 50 and below. And then I could open up the subs and kind of pick up more energy on the ground and less energy from the air. And this was a real cool and simple way to do that. Out of the FDS 310, it went into a pair of 661 compressors. And these were limiters, so I could compress the subs. Getting a overly compressed sub can give you like this real blooming sound and just help things carry out farther. And turning down the compression on the subs gives you more impact and punch and maybe less volume. So this gave me the ability to change the tonal, not the tonal, but the dynamics of the subwoofers manually very easily. Now these are not my favorite sub processor compressors. Now these are not my favorite sub compressors. I like the Symmetrics 501s, are great. I don't think we had two of those available at this point in time. I'm not sure why I didn't use those. I really like those, just the way they sound, the attack time, and amount of compression you can get. The next thing in the rack is the BSS Soundweb. The next thing in the rack is the BSS Soundweb controller, and this is sending those tailored sub signals out to the multiple subwoofer clusters, left, right, and center. DBX120X is the coolest subharmonic synthesizer I've ever used, and it's an amazing unit. It's got RCA inputs on the back, which is a little awkward, so you have adapters, but the sound quality, the 4 or 5 bands of frequency levels allowed you to tune the subharmonic synthesis. And there's a trick to those too. If you come in left and come out right, you get just the pure synthesizer. So that's on a separate send for me and a return, and I can send things to it, send the bass to it, and really drop things down an octave and kind of give that cool ultra low frequency rumble. These are extra EQs, side hangs, extra fills, whatever we've got going on. I like to have everything visible, and so I could copy these EQs down, and you can see that these EQs are different. So one was probably a center cluster, mono center cluster, and mono side hangs or something for this one. And then the same thing here for the Meyer CP10. Music player, just straightforward CD, MP3, SD card player, spare expressor, DPR 404 quad compressors. 3 of them. I really liked these compressors, not only because they were quad in a single rack space, high density, which rack space was at a premium in the analog days, but just the way they sound when they compress. They were fairly delicate. They made a DPR 402 stereo compressor, which was quite popular, but the first compression gain reduction LED on the 402 was 3 dB. This had a 1 dB of gain reduction LED, which I found very important. 3 dB was too coarse and didn't give me enough information. I wanted to know if I was right at the point of compression, and so this 1 dB, 3 dB at the top of the gain reduction was very useful. And it was pretty straightforward, just attack and release and threshold and gain, fast and slow. It was, just a great all-around compressor. And these were all my subgroups. So stereo vocals for the first 2, stereo guitar for the next 2, stereo bass, stereo kick snare, stereo toms, and round metal things. And just a really good set and forget for that mixing strategy that I use, that I've done some videos on. And the distressors here, one for the keyboard just to mellow that out. That's on the channel. And the other two are on the percussion subgroups. I didn't want to put another quad in there. The percussion subgroups, the percussion can have a lot more dynamics. 2 and 3 are on the percussion subgroup. And percussion can have some really quick dynamics, and the distressors are extremely fast. So having more control over the percussion than the 404 offered is desirable. And I mean, those distressors just are so quick. They'll just snap and grab the tiniest little impact and release it very quickly. And I found that control over the percussion. And I found that control over the percussion to be very useful. Another spare and the 510 stereo gates. So I've got 2 sets of the 510 stereo gates, and I use stereo gates on the kick mics. Kick mic 1 and 2 are paired together and they're linked. That way both mics open and close at the same time. Since I'm panning those mics left and right, I didn't want the gates to do anything wonky. It'll be very audible. I'm trying to get as much stereo information into the PA, minimize my mono information, minimize power alley, minimize comb filtering by altering what goes to left and right, so not the same thing. And that stereo gate is a good quick way of grabbing that. And the same thing with the snare top and bottom, which I have slightly panned out in the left and right, and using that stereo gate that's linked was important for that. The snare top will trigger everything and cut off the snare bottom, which that gate tended to linger. I wanted that snare to be contained and snapped together. And next we've got, the quad gate. Next we've got the Clark Technic DN514 quad, and it's the brother to these 510s and 4 gates. I loved these gates. They're just fast and easy. They've got a threshold control and release control, a button for fast or slow attack, and then frequency knobs. There's 2 different ways that people tend to set the key filters for gates and compressors too, but for gates, one is a center frequency and a bandwidth. The other is a high and low pass filter. This has got the high and low pass, which I prefer. I find it easier to use. The center frequency one, you lower the frequency and it adds more lows and takes away highs. I want to just be able to trim the highs or the lows and really dial that gate in. The fast attack tended to have a little click to it. Didn't really matter for this show. I didn't find it annoying, but the 510 with the variable attack and release time instead of a button can solve that. And I'm sure modern digital gates have, forward looking. It's a way to dial all that out. But this quad gate in a single rack space was truly amazing, simple, and performed very well. A little EQ, Lil Freak, parametric EQ. We bought this for a tour for some artist, and I was looking for a way to use it, and I could not figure out what to use it on. So it became a spare, but I brought it just to experiment with because it looked very cool. All right, so there's the rack rundown, and cool. Hope you found this interesting.